Astra Travelers, and welcome to another episode of Tales of Teyvat, a Genshin Lore Podcast. Last week, we talked about Sumeru so far, and boy, could we have talked so much more about it. For now, we're going to pump the brakes on the Dendro Nation and turn our attention to the lore of the Viridescent Venerer. Additionally, I want to remind travelers to visit talesofteyvat.com to see visual representations of the lore mentioned during today's podcast. Your guides have put them together for you to make things a little easier to understand. Also, feel free to email us at talesofteyvatpod@gmail.com to let us know what you think of this week's episode and what topics you'd like to see in the future. But I got a question for you all. Do you guys use the Viridescent Venerer set?
Of course.
Yes, I do. Actually, on my main.
Oh, your main?
Kazuha.
Oh.
I forget that he's Anemo, right? Because it's an Anemo.
Mm-hmm.
I forget until I remember he has a dead friend.
Oh my god.
Oh, yes, that is the
Dead
perfect way to
friend
remember.
theory. Dead Friends Club. You know, Dead Poets Society,
Quote
Dead Friends
unquote
Society.
friend, by the way. Like
Could be
a
husband.
little bit more than a
could
friend.
be.
Like, let's not be homophobic, okay?
True. I'm sorry.
Tomo.
I will gladly say that probably the Viridescent Venerer is best in slot in almost every single Anemo character. Maybe save for Faruzan.
Best in slot. I love that.
Yeah, best in slot. The way Aquila Favonia is best in slot for Jean. It's not actually. It's of course it's a Mist-Splitter because that's the best goddamn sword in the game. No, it like when you look at Sucrose, Venti, Kazuha, Jean, even Sayu together, this set is so good. And it's also there aren't any other sets that do the same. Well, they do the same thing, but they don't do it for Anemo specifically.
Right.
Yeah, it's really like the dedicated Anemo set.
Yeah.
There is a new Anemo set that came out recently in Sumeru too.
Yeah, we would have to play around with that. And I know Zhao has like his own very specific set you can get in the chasm. And depending on your playstyle, you may or may want to switch to that one or to still do Viridescent Venerer. It really just depends on your playstyle. But for the main Anemo DPS and support, usually you're going to choose this set.
So where can we find this artifact set? For travelers who are like, what the hell are they talking about? We are talking about an artifact set today and the lore behind it. So our lore comes from the Viridescent Venerer artifact set, which I believe can be found in the
Valley of Remembrance, right behind Springvale.
Yeah, it's a cute domain.
Yeah, it's named after an artifact set, but Viridescent, quote unquote, was a character.
Yes.
So our lore today is not really so much about the artifact set as it is about the character behind
Right.
the
And
artifact set.
I do have a big ass theory when it comes to domains and artifacts and the lore behind said artifacts, but we'll get to that in a deeper dive.
I just want to say, like, how cool is it that their name was Viridescent?
Is that truly confirmed, or is that just what they called her? Because she didn't really talk to humans and she didn't know the human language.
Yeah, she had forgotten how to speak the human language. I think at one point she did, but she just stopped talking to people. So I don't know if it did come as a, like, they named her that, like the Dandelion Knight, like it wasn't Jean's name.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. I think, though, having a name Viridescent, regardless if it's your real name, is badass.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
To be known as like, so when we look at Venerer, it means hunter. So you're technically the Viridescent hunter. That's fucking metal as shit. Well, not really metal, but like fucking baller.
You're a shiny bow.
Shine bright like a bow.
But yeah, the
we got.
Viridescent Hunt, I should say. The Viridescent Hunt, the actual weapon that goes along with this lore is the Viridescent Hunt, which is a bow. She is the original wielder of that bow.
Right.
You know, and she was known as also as the Queen of the Hunters, although she was never really crowned that. She was just kind of known as the Queen of the Hunter.
So then let's talk a little bit about where Viridescent originally came from, because we've talked already about the fact that, like, she spoke human and now she doesn't, and that she wielded this bow that we all know because it's one of the battle pass bows, so we all know that bow. My understanding is that she is a human originally from Conria.
I have my doubts with her Conrian origins, mostly due to where we find the domain where we get this artifact. That's mostly also because there's reference but of her being in Sumeru and learning the way of the hunt through a particular tiger spirit.
Yeah, I definitely think that she's from Sumeru
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
and then somehow ended up in Mondstadt. I don't know how.
Which, I mean, it might make sense. I know Feeney always has, like, the idea it all leads back to Mondstadt. Maybe Conria is under Mondstadt. I just think Conria is probably closer to Mondstadt than we think.
Is there a reason, Feeny, that you think she's from Conria?
I think it was just that in my head, maybe in the way I was reading the lore, it seemed like the humans were from Conria. I think that some of the lore I read talked about like the ancient kingdom, and I know that they were aware of the cataclysm, very much so. So Viridescent Venerer was very aware of the fact that the cataclysm happened. Meanwhile, when you read Rostham's lore, and for those who don't know, Rostham is a knight of Favonius that died during the cataclysm, who is actually in love with Rosalind, who later becomes La Signora. So when you read Rostham's lore, he specifically says that Rosalind is in Sumeru, and by the time she returns home, the cataclysm should be gone and done, and it's something she shouldn't have to like see. So that makes me feel like the cataclysm happened close to Mondstadt, or was because it was Conria. So that was kind of my thought. It seemed like some of the other nations weren't as privy.
I actually think that it's because Rostam died during the Durin-Dvalin battle, because when Venti and Dvalin went after Durin, Rostam was leading a group of knights into the same battle, and he died there. And Signora is, who, by the way, Signora is from Mondstadt.
Right.
And she had gone to study in Sumeru. And so this battle was happening while she was studying abroad in Sumeru.
Oh, okay. That was my main reason for thinking that the Viridescent was Conrian, was just that it seemed like they were a little more connected to the cataclysm than most. That was really all I thought. But I definitely could be wrong.
So my interpretation, well, first of all, let's get into like who she is, how she was born, and
She was born.
what her deal is.
Wait, are we going all the way back to the birds and the bees?
Yeah,
on this one?
Brandon, when two people love each other very much and they have the correct, reproduction organs.
What? That sounds like some straight people shit. We know she was an orphan, right?
Of course. Because why wouldn't she be an orphan?
Of course.
Everybody's a fucking orphan.
It's either Genshin or Disney. You can't have it any other way.
Yeah. Orphans abound. So she's an orphan, and it seems like for some reason back in the day there were a lot of lost children of the forest. So just these random orphans that end up lost in the forest. I don't know if that's where people were taking their babies they didn't want and just dropping them off.
Kaya was a lost baby in the forest.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
He was a lost baby in fucking dystopian.
But yeah, so back way before the cataclysm, we know that Greater Lord Rukkhadevata created this forest in the desert, which is, what the forest region of Sumeru. That's how that happened. It used to all be desert. Rukkhadevata created this forest in the desert. And from that forest sprung a tiger spirit named Viagara, which I like to pronounce Viagra. That spirit became the Lord of the Forest. And that Lord of the Forest was all about nature and balance and hunting and blah, 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 and taught the children of the forest these values, and then ultimately had their lords of the forest that would come up and like take Viagra's place, right? And sort of carry on that message throughout the generations. So I'm a little unclear from the lore if it was Viagra herself that passed down these values to Viridescent, or if it was one of the lords of the forest that came after Viagra. But either way, whoever was the lord of the forest at the time is the person that taught little orphan Viri these values that she really grew up with.
Where was Viagra for all these other orphans?
Probably dead.
I don't know, man. We need more spirits of the forest. We got one spirit of the ocean kind of in Rodea. She's
I
the
mean, we
bit.
have Cloud Retainer.
Viagra taught all of the children of the forest, and they all were like under that tutelage. It was just that Viri really outshone everyone. Like she became like the master huntress out of everyone.
She was the teacher's pet.
Yes. She was the one who was really good.
What is Viagra's pet?
Viagra's pet.
A human is what it was.
So Viridescent really takes on the principles of Viagra and of the Dendro Archon. And because of that, also seems to get a really like strange connection to the Dendro Archon as well.
Yeah. When I was first researching this, a lot of people were trying to tie that the Viridescent Venerer was an aspect of Greater Lord Rukkhadevata, but we all know that probably isn't the case. This is probably someone who maybe had a dendrovision, who was kind of taught the ways of the hunt, was blessed with a dendrovision, and probably went off to hunt bigger and bigger prey, probably leading her somewhere in Mondstadt at some point, and then finally to Conria.
So you think that the Viridescent Venerer has a vision?
I'm thinking that's the connection to the Dendro Archon. I don't know why I feel like that she would have a Dendro vision. Maybe she just has a vision.
I don't know. I feel like we haven't heard a lot about visions at this point. Like, I shouldn't say at this point in the game, because obviously we've heard a lot about visions in the game. But yeah, visions aren't really mentioned at this point in history for the game.
But okay, one thing with that though is like if it's something a common occurrence and visions are kind of like a way of life, why the fuck would you mention it?
I don't know where they do mention that, though, I think is the...
Exactly.
It's a good question. Like, when did visions originate? Like, when did they start being bestowed?
And when were they first mentioned? Because if we don't know that, maybe it's just been happening and it's something that has always been known. So they assume everyone knows it. Therefore, why would you write it down if everyone knows it?
I feel like the visions go back to Celestia. I feel like the visions and things like that weren't started to be bestowed upon anybody until after the cataclysm, almost as a way to start kind of getting the rule back. Like I think things went a little bit crazy after Conria and the Abyss coming back, and then like Celestia kind of got like, hey, what's going on? We need to make some people fix this shit. And what's the best way we could do it? Make them feel good and give them a vision, make them have extra powers. Because I think like under that same thought that why would they talk about it? Why they talk about it now? So we know that there's some sort of difference between the history and that like we're always talking about the vision as so much of a part of these characters that I feel like back then no one ever seems to
reference it,
have them, or the Celestia thing is honestly is my opinion. I have nothing to back that up with other than my feelings. Just to put that out there.
But it's also a good point because either way, we don't know. Visions could be as recent as the Cataclysm or as ancient as the Primordial one. We have no we have nothing to tell us otherwise, which makes it so confusing.
Right. All we know is that the Archons do not grant them, that it's someone or something else.
Yes. And they technically don't have them.
Right. They have a gnosis. Yeah.
I would like to say that that Viridescent did not have a vision. I think they would have mentioned if there was a vision involved instead of calling it like the connection that they did. If Viridescent did have a vision, they bounced around that way too much. And I think that there'd be another way to say vision and also bounce around like without saying vision, if that makes sense. I lean with Tiff, where I believe that visions didn't start coming around until after the Cataclysm, which partially is because of a crazy theory Brandon has about Celestia creating an army of vision holders if they ever need them. But also, we know that the Fatui Harbingers don't come around until after the Cataclysm, and that they create their delusions to kind of counteract visions, and delusions are still newer in the game currently. And that's why I think, we have the delusion factory in Inazuma and Watasumi Island really being the first non-Shnez Nayans besides Krapus Ravager that we know that have delusions. So let's say for now that Viridescent didn't have a vision. Do we all agree on that?
Yeah, I can agree on that.
Yeah, sure. I feel like my theories do lean towards it happening after the Cataclysm.
Okay.
Just because none of the parables that we've been reading really mention anything about it. What could be a vision, to my knowledge. Like, and you would think there would be like, and then the prince lifted their magical gem and blah, blah, something like that. But we really don't hear anything like that.
No, I think you're right about that. But to go back to the Viridescent Venerer, our sweet hunter, I know we know like the origins, but kind of in a way, we could probably look to her bow description to learn a bit more about her. Should I read a bit of it?
Sure.
Yeah. This is the Viridescent Hunt, right?
Yes. Her bow. To be as pure as the beasts of the verdant fields who roam in the forests in the light of day, to never bear any ill will, and to never lose an arrow for any reason but to survive. The nameless hunter was taught thus and grew thus far away from the city. We were born of the greenery. As long as there is grass and shade, we shall move unimpeded. We are the same as beast and bird. As long as we follow the laws of nature, then we shall not fear death. All those who follow nature, when their life reaches its last ebb, shall head towards the endless plain. Following these precepts, the hunter left no traces and fought not against the natural order. She comforted the wild beasts that had been shot through the heart until their lives had returned to nature. If that calamity had not happened, if she had not tracked the tainted blood upon the leaves, if she had not met that dying, blind youth under the tree where she often napped, then perhaps she may never have been shaken by the thoughts of revenge, by blood and fire.
Ooh, so yeah, maybe we should talk a little bit about how Viridescent became someone interested in revenge and vengeance.
Yeah, I think before we even go into why the revenge switch is even that important too, is that she was, as that kind of story tells us, she was a hunter that hunted simply for survival. She did not do anything out of, let me just hunt for sport or for revenge or anything like that. She was kind of one with the forest. She was very hippie like that. And to the point where like she walked barefoot in the forest because she could feel where the animals were and where the birds were and the roots of the trees and all that kind of stuff. Like she was very in tune with that nature. So it was really a big flip for her to go over to the dark side.
She was just the most granola lesbian you've ever met.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just walking barefoot
Pretty much
through the leaves. She only wore natural deodorant.
She actually wore the flower that you see as a part of this artifact set because it hid her smell from the wildlife.
Yeah, because she's stinky.
She smelled like a human. We all stink.
Yeah, exactly.
I smell really nice. I don't.
Yeah, she made herself smell like wildflowers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then she would go and she would hunt like that, and it, everything was all peaceful and whatnot. The whole thing of her being able to feel that grass and where the prey was and things like that stopped for her as well when she had this switch. And it's either because of the death of Greater Lord Rukkhadevata or because she made this transition, which goes back to the little boy who's also an orphan.
Yeah, orphans.
To kind of like elaborate on like Viri's, I guess, morality that she learned from our Viagra tiger spirit, tiger blood. And it's a common moral that you can see in South America and some parts of lesser known communities where they understand themselves as they live within the forest. They live within the rainforest. Everything they take from the rainforest will be returned to the rainforest, kind of a thing. And it speaks heavily to that. And so when Viri comes upon this dying child who's an orphan who obviously has been attacked not to be fed upon or for survival, just to be attacked and then left for dead. I think her entire moral compass and her version of reality is shattered.
Yeah. I also think that something that lends to that is that she did lead such a lonely existence. Like she was really just very solitary. She didn't even know how to speak human language. I think there are some parts of the lore that say that she forgot how to speak it, but then I think I saw one other one that said that she never knew how to speak it. So I don't know which one is true, but she couldn't speak human language because she was just always by herself in nature, living the nature dream. and, just surviving and thriving in her little world of plants and animals. And they actually say that she feared nothing more than talking to other people or being presented in a situation where she had to try to talk to other people since she didn't know the language. And this did happen to her once where she met some other humans at a campfire, and actually one of her artifacts is a vessel, and that artifact, she actually stored the laughter of the humans at the campfire inside it so that she could listen to it back to herself when she got lonely.
That's so sad.
I was just gonna say, isn't that so sad?
Yeah. And it really sort of informs her character that she does experience this loneliness with other humans. And to me, that helps explain why she took on this whole other path when she meets this dying blind boy at the base of a tree that she used to nap at. And she sort of takes up this mission that he has as her own. And that sort of completely alters her whole life's trajectory.
Now, he was under the tree because wounded by either an abyssal monster or something to do with the cataclysm, though, right?
Yes.
Do we know exactly what happened to him? We just know that he was wounded.
We just know that he was wounded and that he asked her to seek revenge on the abyssal monsters that killed him.
Yeah, because she was following the tainted blood.
Yeah.
So Viri was tracking tainted blood. She thought maybe like an animal had been like wounded and was gonna like, haha, free meal.
Oh, right. She saw like his tainted blood like on some trees and stuff and was following it.
I have like a kind of random question about this story that, popped up when I was reading it. How did she understand the boy? I thought she didn't remember like the human language. How did the two of them connect? How did she know that this boy wanted her to seek out revenge?
That's a good question.
Back to your question.
I think that lends to the side that she did at one point know the human language, but couldn't. Almost like she could hear it, but not read it.
Yeah, maybe she understood it, but couldn't speak it.
It's kind of interesting, though, because it also could lend to the idea that she was looking for a reason to seek out like the vengeance and to let out aggression too. We know that. So she finds this little boy like probably toward the end of the cataclysm or after the cataclysm, because that's why all these abyssal monsters are out and about because of that. And that's also a weird connection, but these abyssal monsters are also why the Yakshas are formed by Zhongli, right? So kind of an interesting connection too is that she goes on this hunt to kill monsters while Zhongli's creating like a task force for it.
That's an interesting thing. I very rarely do I put a lot of these, especially these smaller stories, kind of together like that. I'm glad that you mentioned that because I don't think I ever, while I knew they were happening at the same time, I don't think all the stories meshed together until you said that.
It's fun when you can actually like piece it together, right? When you actually are like, wait a second, I've heard this one before.
Yeah.
But we know that this is happening after the cataclysm, and during the cataclysm, as we talked about last week, the Dendro Archon dies. And the lore for Viridescent says that she is greatly affected, like mentally, basically, by the death of the Dendro Archon, and that she could feel it, that she knows the god of the woods is gone.
Isn't it kind of interesting that she's associated with Anemo and not Dendro?
Yes,
Exactly,
absolutely. Yeah. Which is why I hope that maybe we learn more about her as we discover Sumeru more. And, I feel like there's a...
But wait, is she Anemo because she's got a dead friend? The boy died.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
There you go.
That could be a very good point.
Yep. Always goes back to dead friends.
The fucking theory continues. Wait a fucking minute. Hold up. Wait. Tangent. Jean doesn't have a dead... Wait.
Jean's dead friend is her past self before her mom sold her off into Gunhilder law.
Wow.
I was gonna say, what if she was friends
Seriously.
with Krampus before he died because they were all family friends?
I mean, that could be possible.
That could be, either
Or
way.
we haven't met her dead friend yet.
Every single
It's
one
Lisa.
has a dead friend.
Oh my God.
Lisa's
It was
just a ghost.
foretelling. Yeah, or it's her connection to Vanessa.
Oh, that could be it too. I always thought maybe she just was like that one that didn't have the dead friend.
I will have this Anemo dead friend theory going till my last breath. Ironically.
It does make me wonder, that since we know Viridescent doesn't necessarily know the human language, and we can't confirm nor deny if it's just like she can't speak it or she can't understand it at all, if after the Dendro Archon dies, she kind of has this like little shard of like vengeance seeking instilled in her.
Mm.
And then to see someone so similar to her dying and knowing that the Dendro Archon can't help this boy like the Dendro Archon helped her. If she kind of went on her own like vengeance seeking at that point, she's just like, yeah, the boy told me to do it, but like really it was already instilled in my heart that I was going to do this.
More. That's a good point, because there had to be a little bit more to it, that she wouldn't just say, oh, this stranger, like, I mean, she was in a forest with a bunch of orphan kids. One of them had to die. Sorry.
One of them had to go. Like, what the fuck is this, Survivor?
Like, yes, it's exactly Survivor. She's surviving.
Wow. Instead of Hunger Games, it's Hunter Games.
That was the OG title. They made her change it.
I'm also assuming that because, this run-in with this blind, dying orphan, I don't think he's an orphan. This dying blind boy.
I think we can just assume.
This is happening during the Cataclysm. So I'm assuming that she's already at this point run into abyssal monsters and has probably killed a few of them so far out of necessity. So I could also see, even if she didn't understand what he was saying to her, I could see them having even just like a body language or eye contact moment where she but yeah, like what you're saying, Fiends, where she decides to do this. Like she's like, I've had enough and I'm going after these motherfuckers.
It's like, look into my eyes. Fucking get them wrecked.
I'm sure too, when she like looks down at this boy, she sees what could have happened to her if she hadn't been saved by Viagra.
Maybe I shouldn't say a eye contact moment since he's blind.
Oh my god. I legit forgot. Oops.
We all were like, yeah, Brandon. Yeah, great points. Oh, yeah.
Eye contact for Viri, hand feeling for him.
Oh my god.
We don't even know his name. Does he die? Who knows?
So, yeah, that's what happens up until this point, right? So now Viridescent has changed their path. She is ready to take on every abyssal monster that comes her way. And she decides that she's actually going to become more of a cold-hearted killer, not just killing for need and necessity like she originally was doing. She then follows the same blood trail, the abyssal corrupted blood trail of the boy, back to find the monster. And she slays the monster, which is interesting because her bow is supposed to be pure. I don't know how pure that bow is now. But she then...
Well, no, I think she switches her weapon at some point to protect the bow.
Oh, yeah. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so she knew she was doing...
Yeah.
She's like, let me hide this.
I mean, wouldn't you? I would.
She knew exactly what she was doing.
The feather on the arrow never gets blood on it, right? Like that's part of the thing. Like it's always pristine.
Yeah, but you can use arrows with a different bow.
That's true. Me using the same arrow in every bow I own. That's what I assume Child does in my party.
Uses the same arrow?
Yeah, the one he throws specifically. He's so violent. Anyway, so the Viridescent Venerer, much like Child, is violent and goes on this whole, killing monsters path, I should say, and becomes known as the Queen of Hunters and gets corrupted by the Abyss, like a lot of other people and things we know.
Yeah, that vengeance has seeped into her and almost transformed her to where she even appears like a monster.
And it's very specific. It's every time she kills another monster, for this vengeance, she kind of takes aspects of them until she becomes a monster.
Yeah.
So it's the fact that she's hunting them down specifically to kill them and to enact that revenge. Yeah.
And obviously, after, what we went through with Dvalin and Durin, we know that abyssal blood is corrupted and tainted and it poisons the people that come into contact with it. So we saw that happen with Dvalin. It obviously was happening to people that just were killing abyssal monsters as well. I mean, that's also something that we explored with the Yakshas in our Zhao episode.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Do you think that she was actually affected by karma, like the Yakshas were?
No, because karma is kind of the residual effects of dead gods.
I mean, I think it's all semantics in a way, but I think it's the
True.
same idea. Yeah, she's like, you kill enough of these things and their blood affects you. Like it actually infects you.
Yeah, it's really interesting that Viridescent is almost like Mondstadt's Yaksha. And I say Mondstadt because a lot more of her history that we're going to kind of take a deeper look into now surrounds Mondstadt as well. Like she's later on killed by a Knight of Favonius, or a former Knight of Favonius.
Mm-hmm.
So I would assume that these forests are somewhere in like the Mondstadt, Liyue, Sumeru area. Like she could be intermingling in that general vicinity. So she kind of reminds me of like, I don't know, like a Mondstadtian Yaksha. Like get her up there with Zhao.
Yeah.
What if she was a Yaksha? What would you do if you found out she was one of the Yakshas? That'd be crazy. She's not, because Zhao is the green one, but
Well, and she doesn't, I mean, we know of, she's
green, or
not a
is he kind of
god.
like a bluish purple?
he's green because there's a blue and a purple Yaksha too. Sorry, I don't mean to digress to the Yakshas.
Turquoise.
Turquoise boys.
Turquoise.
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 So how many years do we think she's out there killing monsters?
That's a good question.
I think we can kind of figure that out based on who's going to kill her.
Tiff, why don't you introduce us a little bit to the like very Shakespearean moment that occurs?
It is very Shakespearean.
We love a dramatic tragedy.
Which, before you jump into it, Tiff, I do want to say that the fact that she's also killed in a Shakespearean way just makes me feel like it's even more Mondstadt. I don't know why, but like if something Shakespearean was going to happen, it's going to happen in Mondstadt in my head.
It's just because Venti is a bard and William Shakespeare, aka Francis Bacon, don't get me started, was a bard.
Ooh, I didn't know Shakespeare was a bard. Perfect.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like a bard. It's just, you know, the Renaissance version of a bard. Anyway, it's Francis Bacon. Let's move on.
Who needs Barbados when we can have Shakespeare singing us songs? Bye, Venti. Hello, William. / Francis.
Hello, Bill.
Hi, Bill. So, Tiff, Shakespearean moments.
So as we said, she became more monster-like, and she was, you know, kind of not really seen as a human at this point. And she's killed by the Bloodstained Knight, who mistakes her for a monster.
The Bloodstained Knight has a really fascinating history. He used to be known as the White Knight and was a very chivalrous knight within the Knights of Favonius for Mondstadt, and was just obsessed with chivalry and was on this constant mission to seek justice. So he was killing a lot of monsters just in his career as the White Knight. In fact, he actually saved the Maiden Beloved from the Maiden Beloved artifact set. And the Maiden Beloved fell deeply in love with him and was basically stalking him and like sending him all these gifts. And the White Knight was like, no. There is no gift greater than chivalry itself.
Ew.
And so he kept, you know, wandering around the countryside seeking justice for everyone. And eventually, you know, killing monster after monster started turning him a little dark. And I don't know when the actual abyssal killing comes into play, but I do know that has to have been somewhere along his path, because after a while he turns from the White Knight into the Bloodstained Knight, because all of these, you know, artifacts and his armor and everything, it eventually becomes bloodstained permanently. And the Maiden Beloved had given him this white flower that he had actually pinned on his chest, and it was a white flower, and it was also said to have been extinct, which makes me think it was from Conria, maybe, but I don't know. That flower becomes bloodstained and turns black. Also, this knight's sword ends up being the Black Sword. And if you read the lore about the Black Sword, it's very much like once you start using it, it will sort of corrupt you and turn you into a merciless killer. So he goes, ironically, on the same journey that Viri was on, where they were good and then they start killing in the name of justice, and it twists them into becoming very dark and kind of almost like evil themselves. Not maybe evil's the wrong word, but sort of monstrous themselves. And what the Bloodstained Knight ends up doing is, once he realizes this about himself, he says, you know what? I am going to go to this faraway underground realm that I've heard of.
I
Khaenri'ah, and I'm going to die in battle, just as I meant to do. But then when he goes, he discovers the curse of Khaenri'ah, and he realizes that all these monsters that everyone's fighting are the ex-citizens of that realm, and it makes him so sort of go right back to that sense of justice and vengeance that he actually pledges himself to the abyss. And we don't really know what happens after that, other than he starts some kind of westward journey, and his westward journey is what brings him to cross paths with Viri, who at that time is so monstrous that he just sees her as another monster and he kills her. And fun fact, just to make it even more twisted, the blind boy that Viri witnessed dying that led her down the path that she was on was rumored to be the Bloodstained Knight's brother.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And he was trying to like follow his brother across the land, and that's what ended up getting him killed where Viri found him.
Wait, is that what's referenced in the Deepwood Memories artifact set?
I believe so.
Oh
I think it was Deepwood, because it says that he was the brother of a white knight at the time.
Right. And then, of course, Made in Beloved, the Made in Beloved artifact set, the Bloodstained Chivalry set, the fucking... Oh my God!
I wonder if the Vermilion Hereafter comes into that as well. That Zhao set from the Chasm. I haven't looked at it from the lore side of it, but that would be interesting if it goes even into that side, if there's more of the story. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, it definitely was the Deepwood Memories artifact set that talks about the brother. Yeah, they say that the blind boy followed in the footsteps of his white armored brother, traversing kingdoms, mountains, and rivers, at last becoming lost in the dark forest.
And there was one who remained and walked between the trees, eventually forgetting time itself amidst the hunt for wild beasts, becoming drenched in black blood. She was nearly as ancient as the final lord of the forest, and at the last she dreamed the dream of the labyrinth and the hunt. Wow. I hate that these are all connected.
I love it. And I hope they're all in the anime.
That would be kind of cool. I know we didn't talk about it on here. We were talking about it off of the podcast about what potentially is in the anime. And that would be so neat if it went into, like, instead of going into the story that we're learning about now and following that through, but have the anime just about how it all started, which granted would give out some answers that we need as well. But to follow all those domains and artifacts and all these random people and stuff would be really, really cool.
Honestly, I think we have a really good shot of seeing everything that we've talked about today in the anime. For travelers who don't know, during Genshin Impact's stream for their 2-year anniversary back in September of 2022, because we're now in 2023, just so you guys know, Happy New Year. But during the 2022 live stream for their 2nd anniversary, Genshin announced that they would be doing an anime, and we'll link to the trailer for the anime on our website. It's absolutely stunning. It is gorgeous, and it shows you no people for the most part, but still elicited so many questions in my head. But the rumor for the anime is that it's going to take place during the Archon War, and all of this stuff.
We might not get like the actual part of her becoming monstrous and meeting the blind brother of the White Knight, but she is so much older than that,
right,
that she would have been around during the Archon War, because the Archon War was what 500-600 years before the Cataclysm,
right? But also there's a chance that the anime, once it finishes the Archon War, could continue on. So
right.
It'd be very exciting, and hopefully it does well and people want to see more. But I do want to kind of go back real quick just to something quickly on the Bloodstained Knight. I don't want to get too tangenty about it. So we know that the Bloodstained Knight was actually trained under their current Grandmaster at the time in Mondstadt, Arundelen, and also trained under Rostam, who was the Wolf Pup Knight, or the Wolf Knight, right? Like the Boreas. Boreas. I said Borealis last time.
Arundelen was the Grandmaster of the time, and Rostam was one of the knights and was very friendly, but also sort of a rival of Arundelen's. And Rostam mentored the who became the Bloodstained Knight,
who they assume might be a character called Roland, who we have not heard too much more about either, all these past people. But I think it's really interesting because Rostam was in love with the Crimson, and at the time she wasn't, but was in love with Crimson Witch, which is La Signora / Rosalind. And also you have the Bloodstained Knight, who was in love with the Maiden Beloved. And it's just really interesting that all of these characters kind of like their paths are crossing at the same time. all these people we are getting very second and third hand knowledge about. I mean, you guys heard Al and B just now. They literally went through how many different artifact sets to piece everything together. And I think it's interesting because the Dendro artifacts that you guys were talking about just came out recently. So they're constantly adding to this lore too, and we're learning more and more, which makes me feel like they're going to be more important as the game goes on. I also think it's really interesting, and then I swear I'll stop talking about this Bloodstained Knight. I like a dark knight. What can I say? I think it's really interesting that he started going west, and like Brandon said, that's when he ran into Viridescent, but we're kind of assuming that like west or northwest of Mondstadt is Snezhnaya. And he did initially pledge himself to the Abyss. So there's a chance that he could still be in the Abyss and he could know our sibling. But there's also a chance that they left the Abyss and joined the Harbingers. We know that a lot of Harbingers come out of the Cataclysm. Basically, everyone we know any real lore about besides Child has come out of the Cataclysm from something.
It's entirely possible that he could be Il Capitano.
Yes, because we can't see his face or anything. So he could be corrupted.
Plus, he's got his helm.
Yes.
So that the Bloodstained Knight could be Il Capitano, because there is a voice line, I believe, from Child that says that he's known for great strength and an unwavering sense of justice, which sounds a lot like the Bloodstained Knight, right? Remember, like when he was the White Knight, he was all about justice. And then he also criticizes Signora's methods as having, quote unquote, tarnished her honor at her funeral. And the Bloodstained Knight, you know, he was the student or the pupil of Rostam, who became Signora's lover at the time. So he would have been close with Signora. So just throwing that out there as a theory.
I love it.
To back on that theory. All right. Okay. So we know the artifacts sets hold a lot more lore than we would have originally thought. I think one, Capitano more than likely is the Bloodstained Knight. But I also think the Viridescent Venerer, even though she did die, maybe was brought back as one of the Harbingers. Because this all hangs on one fact, and that is the Crimson Witch set, which we all know the Crimson Witch set is entirely referencing La Signora and her past, right? Mind you, how do we get these fucking artifacts? We go through domains, and these domains have little silver trees, very much similar to Irminsul, which it's possible that all of this, the stories and the histories of the Harbingers, except for maybe Child because he is the youngest, and for Skara, who's no longer one, for those that we don't know, maybe their histories were deleted, like all 4 delete by Irminsul, and these are the last bits and pieces we get of their history. And maybe Viridescent Venerer is Archileno, the second youngest, I think so. I think she's 9. Is she 9 or is she 8? Either she could be Viri.
Arlecchino,
yes.
What is her other name? Is she the knave?
The knave, aka the servant.
The knave. Oh, the knave also runs that crazy orphanage in Snezhnaya.
Exactly.
Of course.
Exactly. Which these could just be sets exploring the histories of the Harbingers, or this could be another clue to how Irminsul can delete history and we don't remember it except for the small artifacts that are left and survive in these small pocket dimensions. Oh my god, there's so much I could go into on this. It is a vast theory. many fucking holes.
I think you have such a good point, though, Al, because if you look up what I'm going to call her the knave, because I know I'm not going to get the other name right. But if you look up what the knave said during Signora's funeral, she calls her Rosalind.
Yeah.
And that's something the child does not do. And it's also interesting that the knave runs an orphanage when the knave became evil because she saved an orphan little boy and was also an orphan herself.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And also, doesn't La Signora not know that she's Rosalind or knows the actual history of Rosalind?
Well, La Signora is Rosalind.
Yeah. She knows her name is
And she's the
Rosalind,
Crimson Witch.
but does she remember her history in Mondstadt before the Cataclysm?
Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah, because I know she sort of, when Rostam, her lover, died, you know, she gets back from Sumeru because Signora was from, originally Rosalind was from Mondstadt. And she actually was known for singing in the town square. And it was said that her singing was the only thing, because Rostam was a very uptight guy, and her singing apparently was the only thing that could like get his brow to like unfurl.
Yeah.
I bet you it wasn't the only thing.
They were very much in love. What was that?
I said, I bet you that wasn't the only thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, if she looked anything like she did when she's
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so they were very much in love, and then she goes off to study in Sumeru, and then he dies. And then when she comes back and discovers that he's dead, she almost does like a Dark Phoenix moment, which turns her into the Crimson Witch.
So she forgotten all of that part beforehand.
So I don't know if she remembers or not. I would assume she remembers, but I don't know.
She was known as the Crimson Witch in that little pocket of witches with Alice and stuff too, right?
The
Like she
Hexen
didn't.
Circle.
I just love that Brandon knew that like right away. I will say I would have to think that she does remember herself a little bit. Maybe not too much. How much can you remember yourself 500 years later? But she was accepted into the Sumeru Academy shortly before like the Cataclysm happened, and that's why she was in Sumeru and why Rostam was like, I hope she doesn't see this, you know. And she was actually studying pyromagic there. So that's kind of why she became the Crimson Witch of Flames, and she might have been using some alchemy or magic that consumed her body. That's like the assumption when she got angry and became the Crimson Witch and was like, she's gonna solve the crookedness of the world. And she kind of like, they said, like she abandoned her mortal body, which like, I don't know how you do that. But you
Sounds
can.
sexy.
How can I do that?
Yeah, can we all do that?
But yeah, I think it's very interesting. And then she was recruited by Piero, and he gave her a cryo delusion to help suppress like the flames inside of her. So I guess they did maybe have delusions 500 years ago. I know we brought that up earlier. So, but again, nothing is mentioned of a vision, which I think is interesting. But yeah, so why are we talking about Rosalind? Let's go back to the knave.
It's all connected, goddammit.
I definitely think she could be the knave, and I think it'd be very interesting. Again, old Mondstadtians became harbingers.
Well, do we have anybody that's been reincarnated other than Chi-Chi? Like, we know she's a zombie.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't call Chi-Chi's situation reincarnation necessarily either. She was preserved like a jam.
What if all of the Fatui Harbingers are people from the past that were like plucked out of their timelines by Dottore?
Oh, fuck. Oh, no. Oh, shit. But wait. Oh.
All besides Child.
Yeah, I mean, he's the youngest.
Yeah, he is the youngest. He's nowhere near a century yet. Once he gets to a century, we'll have something.
I think that's definitely possible. I mean, just in this episode alone, we've talked about Rosalind, the Bloodstained Knight, and Viridescent all possibly being harbingers. And we know Piero is from Conria. We know Dottore is also originally, I don't know if he's originally from Sumeru, but we know he studied in Sumeru.
Yeah, because he was kicked out of the academia, right?
Right. So there is a lot of, backstory. And Dottore is also from the Cataclysm time period. We know that as well. So it's definitely a possibility.
I'm behind all of that because it just continues to lead toward my theory that the Fatui is at the bottom of it all.
I'm dead.
Still holding on to that one.
So my last question here for you guys would be, do you think that we're going to come across any new lore about the Viridescent Venerer as we continue on in Sumeru? And this will be spoiler heavy right now. I'm just warning. You've been warned, so shut it off now. But as we've recently learned in Sumeru, Nahida is the god of wisdom forever, apparently. She has made it so that Rukkhadevata is no longer remembered, including to Nahida and including in Irminsul.
Control-Alt-Delete, motherfuckers.
So, if you were to go back in time now, Viridescent's history changes a little bit. You have Rukkhadevata dying, but now Rukkhadevata has always been Nahida. So there's a question of is history itself going to change? We saw in the Skara Archon line, when we get him as the Wanderer, that they really just changed history a little bit. So it wasn't Skara didn't kill Kazua's ancestor, but someone else did. So maybe they just are adjusting history again.
In a way, it's just a slight adjustment, because they're not taking away Rukkhadevata. They're not saying, oh, Rukkhadevata is not the god anymore, it's Kusanali. It doesn't change the fact that Gritter Lord Rukkhadevata was a big influence on Viri. It just changes who had that experience with Viri, and it would be Nahida instead of...
Yeah, because Rukkhadevata is not real anymore.
But if we're saying that part of how the Viridescent Venerer lost her morality was partly because of the death of Rukkhadevata.
Yeah.
Oh,
that would change where her need for this vengeance, which could have just been replaced by something else too.
I mean, we're not completely sure that that was the sole influence. I do like to think that because, again, she saw a little kid that could have been her, and also her whole reality of you only kill to survive, and this is just senseless killing or senseless bloodshed, that could have driven her to revenge and her vengeance. But in truth, we don't know. We don't know if we have created a different universe.
The one thing to keep in mind about all of the lore about Viri is that all the language is a little bit more ambiguous. I don't think any of it actually names Rukkhadevata.
They just say God of the Woods.
Yeah, they say, God of the Woods, or...
So there's a possibility that in the history of Teyvat, that the god of the woods still died, but Nahida is the god of wisdom, that kind of thing.
Well, I think Nahida would be the god of the woods, but that's a really fun question to ask, because if the backdating changed it to where, she was aligned with Nahida instead of Rukkhadevata, but does Nahida remember her now?
Yeah, is that a false memory in Nahida's mind? That's why I feel like they could create kind of like with Skara, where they change it so that other people did the murders that Skara had done. I feel like they could change it where there was a god of the woods that was different than the god of wisdom, and maybe that god did die, or
maybe they'll just switch it to the Lord of the Forest.
Yeah, that's true. Viagra, yeah. And also for travelers who haven't done the Sumeru storyline and are here for the spoilers, or who have done the storyline and maybe don't remember that much, we do see two giant happenings in Irminsul. One where Rukkhadevata is completely forgotten, and one when Skara is completely forgotten. And once you finish that Archon line, even though some things do change throughout it, we find out that Child no longer has a voice line about Skara, that the Raiden Shogun no longer has a voice line about Skara, and that some of our books and things have changed and no longer mention Rukkhadevata. Some of the Archon characters who are playable, like Zhongli and Venti, have new voice lines about Rukkhadevata as well. So there is a chance that some of the stuff about the Viridescent Venerer could also have changed and we don't know yet. But if it hasn't changed, I would think they've already figured it out, I guess.
Yeah, I could see maybe Nahida bringing it up somehow. That would actually be really interesting. But it's weird because her lore is so immersed in Sumeru origins, but it's also really prevalent as what we think of as Mondstadt history.
Yeah.
Just because we associate, her artifact set being there and everything. I mean, I'm assuming that she was born in Sumeru and then ended up in Mondstadt, but it's kind of a mystery.
Yeah, definitely a mystery.
Can I actually ask one question, which it might sound extremely silly, but it's something that trips me up a bit. Irminsul is the tree throughout Teyvat. Like, or is it
Yes.
that area? Like, where do the ley lines then come into Irminsul?
The ley lines are the roots of Irminsul that are just like throughout the entire world, but are
Okay.
typically underground.
I could be wrong, but I think there are some above the ground in Inazuma. And when you do the second Raiden Shogun storyline, she has some memories created from them.
Yes, that was going to be my other part.
Yeah, they peek up out of the ground all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. So they are one and the same. Like, they're not two separate.
Right.
For some reason, that just wasn't connecting for me. And I'm sure it's happened to others too, where
Yeah.
it's just like, are these two things? I mean, this game likes to give everything 35 names. So
Yeah, Irminsul is somewhere under the ground. When we initially were being shown trailers for Sumeru, we saw Irminsul like completely on fire. Did we ever see that in the Archon line?
No.
That's yet to be determined.
Oh, so we got a lot more Archon and Sumeru coming.
We might have more fucking Sumeru map coming.
Yes, that is very
that's
true.
Well, there's like that one little part too over on the left, I think, that like dips in. That looks like it should be opened.
Oh yeah, the whirlwind thing,
Yeah.
which is almost certainly covering up a
Sandworm.
Skynail.
Oh, a Skynail. I'm like, a sandworm. I'm like, I'm so scared of it.
Sandworm.
No, it's a sandworm stabbed with the Skynail.
Yes.
Yes.
There's definitely, so I brought this up briefly last time, but the goddess of flowers, remember her? When she is talking to King Deshret, when he's trying to get her to help him unlock the forbidden knowledge, one of the things she warns him about is to not be afraid of the giant, I think she says giant sapphire nail, something like a nail.
Ooh.
So she references it.
This just leads into my theory that King Deshret is just an allegory for King Solomon.
On that note, I think we're gonna finish up today's episode, guys. I feel like a lot more came out of this than I could have ever expected from an artifact set's little background
Dude,
and
don't
lore.
sleep on the fucking artifacts!
No,
Yeah.
you're right. And we'll definitely do some more of these in the future. But for now, I'd like to thank all of our travelers for coming along with us into the past and into the unknown. Next week, we're going to be talking about the Sacred Sakura in Inazuma. Additionally, we'd like to remind our travelers that you can follow us on Instagram, Tales of Teyvat Pod, or on Twitter, Tales of Teyvat, to let us know what you thought about today's episode and what topics you might like to see in the future, or what you don't want to see. Did you like Viri? Are you cool with her? What do you think about her past? Let us know. You can also shoot us an email at talesofdevoutpod@gmail.com. Otherwise, safe journeys, travelers. We'll see you next time.
Bye, hunty nerds.